Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. There are a few notes of which I would like to inform you before we begin our program. First, we have ASL interpreters and closed captioning available. For closed captioning, please click on the caret symbol next to the closed caption button and select Show Subtitles. To view the ASL interpreter's video at a larger size while slides are displayed, you can enlarge the gallery view. If the window does not automatically launch into side-by-side mode, select the side-by-side mode view by selecting on View Options at the top of your Zoom window. You can then toggle the divider between the speaker's cameras and presentation to enlarge the video. We will be recording this event and posting it on our EDI websites, so please check back next week. Before we get started, I would like to make a few acknowledgements. The UC San Diego community holds great respect for the land and the original people of the area where our campus is located. The university was built on the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. Today, the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community. We acknowledge their tremendous contributions to our region and thank them for their stewardship. Welcome to our program today. We will continue our discussion around effective strategies and behavioral norms to help deepen and develop greater capacity for anti-racism work and allyship, with a focus on white allyship at UC San Diego. Our campus continues to make great strides amidst the social, political, and economic challenges of our time, and the Vice Chancellor Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is pleased to be a partner with many of you in achieving our institutional goals. We are glad you have joined us today. Today's program promises to be stimulating and enriching. As a reminder, you may submit your questions utilizing the Q&A function on your Zoom control panel. Now, I would like to introduce the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Dr. Becky Pettit. Please welcome Vice Chancellor Pettit. VC Pettit?
Thank you, AVC Forbes Berthoud, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for part 2. In session 1, Dr. Obear created a baseline of knowledge to discuss what is allyship? What does it mean to be anti-racist? How do we dismantle racism? And why is there now urgency for more of our white allies to join us in tackling these issues? Today, we're continuing the conversation on white allyship and anti-racism work. Several hundred participants registered for the first seminar, and again today to indicate their commitment to gaining new knowledge and tools to become active and impactful allies and to contribute to a better experience at UC San Diego. I say this all the time, but it bears repeating that campus climate is the responsibility of all of us. And today is part of a collective effort to ensure a better university environment where all community members feel welcome and able to flourish. You'll hear about how to put knowledge and allyship into practice and to incorporate those practices in your daily life to help us create a cultural shift in making UC San Diego more welcoming. To support that knowledge and skill building, we continue to offer self-paced modules on our webpage, diversity.ucsd.edu. Among them, a 21-day anti-racism challenge, which is now self-paced, as well as a white accountability action and allyship initiative. But now I want to introduce you to our invited speaker, Dr. Kathy Obear. For those of you who are not able to join us for part 1, you can read her more extensive bio on our website, but a brief introduction. Dr. Kathy Obear is president of the Center for Transformation and Change and is nationally recognized as an expert in helping leaders, change agents, and facilitators develop the capacity to create equitable, inclusive, and racially just organizations. Kathy is also co-founder of the Social Justice Training Institute, an intensive professional development experience designed to deepen capacity to dismantle the dynamics of racism and white supremacy in ourselves and in our organizations. Welcome, Dr. Obear.
Thank you, Dr. VC Pettit. I'm Kathy Obear. I use she, they pronouns, and in Denver, Colorado, the original stolen, exploited territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux. And I just want to invite us all to breathe. Since we were last together, so much has happened. In this last week, so much has happened. And as white allies, change agents, and folk of color, indigenous folks who may be here, what is our collective role in recognizing how racism, white supremacy, whiteness is showing up everywhere, the whole whack-a-mole, in so many revised ways, these things I didn't see before. And what is our role, particularly as change agents? So please, let's just breathe together. Because as you just said, we did concepts and terms, what is race, socially constructed, anti-Blackness, how to make sure we're looking for that everywhere as we hold the full breadth of marginalized, racialized identities. The big lie of white supremacy that I grew up with, that whites are smarter, better, more deserving, and supposed to help people of color, help indigenous folks. And so webinar one's still available if you find it useful. Today, what I want to do is go beyond the high level vision and the what, why we have to do it, the potholes we get into, particularly as white allies and change agents in this work, and really move into awareness building, what you can do in your sphere of influence, meaningful action, and not wait for top leaders, the next layer, wherever you are in this window of sustainable change and possibility. And too many organizations I'm talking to, folks of color, indigenous folks, are saying, actually, leaders have closed that window. They are no longer living into their commitments from the summer, the time of increased racial reckoning and more statements. And UCSD particularly has had a lot of energy and awareness building. So what can you do from your sphere of influence? What now? And that's what I want to talk about. And I believe what I'll offer today, you could be doing literally this afternoon, this weekend, and implementing some of the tools and skills. There's a revised packet that was sent out, and there'll be a follow-up, the packet as well as the PowerPoint. I think they're dropping these into the chat if you want, but how do you lead from where you are up to your leaders as they're being held accountable? How can you support them sideways to all colleagues and, quote, all around? You may have supervisory responsibilities in classrooms. So how can you share all these resources, model the new ways to be white, integrate these tools I'll share into all planning, all meetings, analyzing all practices, offer to lead conversations about what are some current practices we need to analyze with the race lens, and really initiate conversations with leaders. What's your level of resolve? And so in the revised packet 76 to 81, I just wanted to highlight, for another client, I put together a beginning dialogue, maybe 10 or 11 different activities and steps with a team, a department, a division, colleagues you want to just bring together. And so in there are some talking points that I'll be hitting today. What I know is, after George Floyd was murdered, there was a lot of things I've learned, that as a white person showing up, dismantling racism, there was a lot I didn't know. And so I've been on my own learning, very accelerated. And what I realized is most organizations had a high level, this is our vision, but what they hadn't done is gotten specific about what does this mean for our department, our division. Even the systemic UCSD of access, success, climate accountability, to bring it down into what does this mean for us in a daily? And so to ask the questions and have deep ongoing conversations within the folks you work with and serve, What does it mean in our area, both as we're serving externally, working with partners, and our internal culture, climate, accountability? And I found these questions have helped folks, white and folk of color, Indigenous folks, to be in those brave conversations. How do you want people to feel and be? BC Pettit, you said flourish. I thrive is what comes up for me as I hear flourish also, right? Who will be a part? So not only representation throughout the organization, but if we really envision a racially inclusive, anti-racist organization, what will everyone be doing? The demonstrated competence that we will be held accountable to. How will people be treated? What will we be doing and not doing, and spending some time on that not doing? Because so many folk in organizations think, I just have to be a good individual as a white person, not say anything racist, and not realize actually we have to show up, scanning the environment, noticing racist microaggressions, interpersonal policies, practices, and shifting. So spending some time envisioning helps defrost the organization, realize it's everyone's responsibility, and get many more voices into the conversation. And the next conversation is, how close are we? And not just a checkoff, we talked 0 to 10, but real engaged dialogue. Where are we? Interpersonal policies, practices, services, programs, curricula. And that's a chance to really look at data and pull all the data you have, the quantitative, qualitative, disaggregate it by race, and not just white folk of color, but all the racialized, minoritized identities, and even with other intersecting identities, to really see, do we know how folks are impacted differentially by race and other intersecting identities, our services, our programs, our climate, our culture? I don't know about you, but I find many more students, staff, faculty, I am no longer accepting things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Dr. Angela Davis. And many of us who are boomers, and maybe even next gen, who aren't in that energy, are engaging folks who are change agent allies and folks that are daily negatively impacted by white supremacy culture, racism, nationally, locally, and in the discrete moments at UCSD. How do we work collectively to move into this call for transformational change? Something new I've been learning and doing with all leaders is asking directly, what is your level of resolve? What's your level of resilience? And so you can lead from where you are, asking all the leaders and colleagues you work with, is this another check the box, or are we in this for the long haul to truly create an anti-racist organization? And what's the inevitable resistance that we will have? And are we in the level of resolve? Ask yourself that, your colleagues who identify as white, change agents, and then leaders, will you stay in it? I was working with a dean of a school of education. I asked that, and she said 100%. We intend to be the national premier anti-racist college of education. I said, okay, I'll work with you because you said that, committed. The team was there, they agreed. But in addition to mission, vision, values, your strategic plan around inclusive excellence, the leadership case, the why, I thought that was enough. So here's something else that I've learned since George Floyd's murder, and I've been immersing myself more in dismantling racism, creating racial inclusive anti-racist organization, is work with the leaders to get very clear what are the expected competencies, and not just create an inclusive organization. I want to offer 11, and again, this is in your packet, that it was 10 a week ago, and I added some. But can you imagine if your leader said, we will hold everyone accountable, including ourselves, racially inclusive, high-performing teams, departments, all respected, valued, belonging, thriving, able to contribute to their full potential. Product, services, classrooms, programs. And to that end, everyone deepening professional development and learning, awareness, skills, knowledge. We talked about that in the first, so that we can stay in the dialogue and not run to white fragility, defensiveness, but really deeply listen and then recognize, interrupt those racist behaviors. So as I do this, just notice, where are you? Where are your white colleagues? And where would leaders be? And can they have a conversation, whether it's this list of 11 or my suggested competencies, which has 96, can be overwhelming. But can you imagine if in your division department, you said, we expect everyone to enter racist dynamics. We're going to build this into coaching, supervision, performance management, team development, professional development, and the capacity to give and receive feedback, the impact of your behavior actions without going defensive misjudgment to really shift when white privilege is embedded, understanding where it is, how it shows up in the culture, practices, policies, shift it without the huge resistance. And then some of the tools I'll offer today, how to use a race lens in planning, decision-making, to analyze your practices, policies, services, really revise them, inclusive conversations to do that, and then shifting those unproductive, dominant white cultural norms. So just breathe of some of this language. You're feeling yourself have a hot button or a trigger. I'll give you a few tools as we keep going. But the last competency that I want all leaders saying, again, it's a collective conversation, and then agree to and implement a system of development and accountability that accelerates our progress. So without clear accountabilities built into, as I said, coaching, team development, but more than that, hiring, promotion, tenure, that might have stirred a few feathers. All of our training and development are intentionally, whether it's communications, decision-making, conflict, you're building in these same competencies. You're teaching in the white accountability groups. That's the work we need to do. Great leaders don't tell you what to do. They show you how it's done. Until we get the line of supervision, everyone's clear what their responsibility is. And then you give people a chance to develop, but ongoing accountability. Whew. Individually, have to develop to look at the internalization of the racist attitudes, white supremacist beliefs that whites are smarter, better, where we've colluded in our silence, but really at the group level. Differential experiences, privilege, marginalization, the microaggression, skills to interrupt. And what I want to do is share you some tools about climate, because most organizations do better at interpersonal, and too many whites are like, if I just don't say it or interrupt when I do it, that's enough. We have to be committed to looking at the culture and the climate that we might have inherited, that actually we might have replicated. It's like the water, the air, we don't even know it's there until maybe we slow down to look. In fact, we might be deeply attached to things like perfectionism or urgency or get the task, which there are moments that's useful, but much of the time there's other ways we need to do. And so in our privileged identities, we have created department, division, team 101 climate culture that may work for us, but we may not have collectively created it so that it really serves it all. We think it's the right way, the professional way. So in your packet on pages 58 to 60, I developed a new handout this fall to try to get teams, departments to look at the unwritten rules. What is the climate and the culture? To warm them up, I have people go, remember a time you thrived, respected, sense of belonging, you felt valued. What was that like? And what was the climate and the culture? Describe it. Try to get 10 to 15 descriptors and share that. Small group, large group, full group. And similarly in pairs, when your voice input was discounted, ignored, you were chastised for speaking up, questioning, being innovative, blocked from bringing your full brilliant self, a non-thriving climate. What was that? Descriptors, again, no names, but warm people up, share what that is. And then in this handout, I think I have about 100 descriptors. I think 25% are the world I want to live in, and maybe 70 to 75. So have them look at this and say, any page, because there's 2 to 2.5, start there. Which ones of these describe for you thriving, able to be your best, high performance, serving the students, staff, faculty here to serve, and which leave you feeling dismissed, disrespected? Full breadth of differences is how I might enter, and then move into, so what are the unwritten rules we have? And if you don't have the packet in front of you, this is a handout. Left side are some of the ones that jump out at me that really perpetuate whiteness, unproductive white culture, privileged whites. The right side is what I want more of. And so lead a conversation with folks. What are the ones that we have that actually help us thrive, live into anti-racism? Which ones actually get in our way, and how do we shift it? That's the ongoing conversations for leaders to be having. Again, which ones support, create, high-performing, racially diverse teams, classrooms, task force, which undermine the goals of inclusive excellence, access, success, climate accountability, create negative impact, really perpetuate racist dynamics. Just breathe. This conversation is not a one and done. And so having people come back to it, but then really have maybe some working groups or folks really look at, let's continue the conversation. And what do we want different? Have the whole group then work and have that conversations. And how can we shift these exclusionary dynamics? Whether, again, all supervisors are asked to do that, all managers, get it in the line of supervision, the unproductive, exclusionary, dominant white cultural dynamics in the culture. For those that want to be stretched even farther, many of y'all might be familiar, it might be in some of the work you're already doing, the white supremacy culture work of Kenneth Jones and Tema Okun from Change Work. You can just Google white supremacy culture. I couldn't say those words for years, much less look at the characteristics and then go, how am I colluding with, perpetuating? When are they useful? When are they not useful? That ongoing conversation in white accountability groups can be a great place for white change agents to notice which ones we're attached to, and yet to realize our demand for comfort, our fear of open conflict is truly getting in the way. Our belief there's a right and a wrong way to do things. I could keep going, but I want to recommend this if folks are ready for this conversation. And Tima's doing a webinar within the next month of her revised work. Kenneth Jones has passed, so you could also Google her or email me. I'm signed up for it just to keep learning. So just breathe. Albert Einstein, the problems of the world will not be solved on the level of thinking we were at when we created them. All the work we did, webinar 1 and now, can help white leaders, change agents, allies, those that are not quite ready to be on board, learn, grow, and develop new ways of thinking, engaging, new ways to be white. And there might be a lot of activity going on, but what leaders need to do with equity inclusion groups or the whole department, what are the specific actions you've already implemented? And again, there's an annual review process here at UCSD, what's in process, but get it down to your area of influence to really progress, accelerate towards fulfilling the anti-racism vision, the strategic plan. What's the how? And then what else is possible? As you look at where you've been, what your data is, where you want to go, here are 3 ways that you literally could take back today and have people. I don't think all white people have to be as far along in their racial consciousness and skill. They can learn by doing to practically use a race lens in first step planning and decision making. So first, have a conversation with whatever team it is, whatever group. So room where it happens, a little Hamilton there. But who do we have here and who do we serve? And do we have the right representation and knowledge? So who do we work with, serve? What's our data say? Therefore, who needs to be in the decision-making and planning directly that we don't have? And again, representation may not mean racial consciousness. So just keep breathing and make sure you've got data and students involved, in my opinion, in all decision-making. And then breadth of differences. And these are just some of the intersecting racialized identities that come into race, but there's more. And so make sure you're thinking about culture, ethnicity, national origin, immigration, refugee, which I never have on my screen unless it's listed documentation. And in this moment in time, trans identity with all the hate legislations that's happened. And I could keep going, but a lot of intersecting identities. What do we know about those we serve? How many of these are on our screen when we're making decisions individually? What are on your screens collectively? What are and which aren't? How do we keep it? Some people have taken that list and actually put it up on a wall or in the packet in an agenda. Speaking of agenda, if you just want the simple way to move forward, take these 5 questions and put them on every agenda, and they're in your packet around 66 to 69. And no decision gets very far, no idea gets very far until maybe 2 people are assigned each meeting to say, okay, sounds like that's something we want to talk about more by group membership, whose needs are met, who will have success, access, how will this help create a climate and accountability, whose needs aren't met by racialized identities, unintended advantages, white privilege, barriers, obstacles for folk of color, indigenous folks, negative impact. And you just ask those questions over and over every idea. And then it's like, oh, we didn't think about that. So what could we do differently to minimize, eliminate? These 5 questions could be, you just keep going. So that's one. The next is, you could look at individual policies, practices, products, and services. And while most are complex, I'm trying to think like remote learning process policy that you probably are relooking at USD given the pandemic. Dress code, attendance in classrooms or work, bereavement, sick leave, who gets access to what professional development, email policies. So policies, practices, programs, how we, this workshop we do for new students, to really analyze, again, by group membership whose needs are met. And so the same questions. Gather a group of folk, collect up a whole bunch of these program policies. There's some in the packet. And then which might be improved to meet the needs, full breadth, move into strategic plan. Some people have opened this up to the entire campus or the entire division to say, we have a working group beginning to look at current practices. Which would you recommend we do eventually? And which 5 do you think we need to really work on now because they have a significant impact on the quality of life? As you're working in a group or a team, start with 0 to 10. How inclusive is it and why? Let's look at our data in general. Choose one to start. Here's what I wish I knew a long time ago. Get clarity. Who makes this decision? Who is going to have to say yes, and what information do they need? Get them involved. And maybe someone they work closely with, they can be on the working group that's analyzing policy practices and things. Full breadth of differences again. Same 5 questions just to make it simple. And you may want to shift some of the language of this, or 5 is too many. But clear questions that are worked through every policy, every practice. The third way, so you got planning and decision-making, discrete policies, practices, programs, services, analyze, get people the skills to do it, and just repetitive. And having some folks in your organization, my guess is your HR folks, your IR folks are already involved in process mapping. So I'm just going to highlight, there is a new webinar that's on the front page of your packet, how to use a race lens and all these ways I'm talking about. LCY Cross Associates talked about process mapping and noticing the discretionary points was their language. So literally you bring a team together to map out the entire process. Let's say hiring A to Z, and in your packet, I have about 18 pages of some ideas. It's old, please give me grace. But what A to Z could look like: racially diverse, culturally competent hiring practices, candidate pools, final staff faculty hires, all the formal and informal. And so get people to really sketch these out and then ask, where are the discretionary points where anyone with inattention, indifference, or some racist implicit bias, or maybe not so implicit, could have impact? And then identify those, analyze, revise, and shift, and just continuous improvement. We're looking minutely. And so a group comes together. Let's say you want to look at onboarding. How do you bring on new staff, faculty? So you ask people to collect up what's the current practice, and then what are 5 or 10 that you're like, might need to be revised. And then what's the probable impact? I'm beginning to use a -10 to +10, because some might be a +3 and still could be improved. And some could be, this is so egregious across race and other identities that we have to really shift it now. This is when urgency might be useful. Have people come with some of that prepared, work in their groups to do that, and then come. Same 5 questions. What are those? By group membership, whose needs are met, and then ask, okay, now that we've got a whole list and a lot of discretionary points, we have some understanding from the data, where do we want to start? Choose some. What could be different? And that's when you want to involve possibly the whole department, the whole team, maybe look at other campuses. As you're in working groups, make sure you go, well, we don't know enough information to change that. So just hope you get the feel. It's a continuous process that we are always under construction, policies and practices, procedures, climate, deepening the capacity of white allies, change agents, and the folks that are now held accountable for these competencies. Everyone, ongoing development, ongoing supervision and coaching. We're always under construction, but it's no longer a nice thing to do, the moral thing to do. It is your job, and it is everyone's job, and we will hold you accountable for access, success, climate, and accountability. And I love this, Celestine, which I'll end on. It's easy to feel helpless, like you can't fight the tide, but remember, small actions can have a huge impact, and one person like you can inspire others to action, to lead from where you are and influence and sphere, up, out, wherever you are, be a model, a role model, push, unrelenting, unwavering, use that white privilege to support UCSD to live into the university it says it wants to be. Again, thank you for your work on anti-racism. I really appreciate you bringing me today.
Dr. Kathy Obear, amazing, wonderful. I am involved in this work very much, and still I'm learning things. So I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. And did you say defrost the organization? I made a note of that. So here are the things that I learned. We welcome your additional comments, and then we'll bring BC Pettit in for questions. Work from your sphere of influence are some of the key areas that you mentioned. Asking us, what is our level of resolve? What is our level of resilience? That's a great question for us at UC San Diego. We really appreciated your review of the expected competencies. There were 10 when we talked a few weeks ago. No, you said there are 11. I'm sure if we kept going and living, we'd get to 45, right? And so what it says is, as you said, we're always under construction. So we appreciate that, learning about unwritten rules and asking those key questions, those 4 or 5 key questions by group membership. And what we're seeing here is a lot of this will require muscle and practice because we're not used to doing it as you've described it. So thank you, thank you. We are now going to bring BC Pettit into our conversation, and we have some questions that we would like to ask from our office and from the work that we do on campus. And then in a few moments, we are happy to take questions from our UC San Diego community. So one of the questions that we have internal to our office, and BC Pettit will kick off, and we welcome your feedback as well, is how are leaders and change agents infusing anti-racism into daily operations? So to BC Pettit to discuss that on our campus, and then Kathy, we welcome your feedback on what you're seeing in industry, in higher education, and nonprofit. What are the best practices that you've seen? And we'll start with sharing what we're doing so you can help us with what we can continue to do, strengthen, or change. BC Pettit?
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Obear, for another fantastic presentation. Again, I continue to learn as well. So how are leaders infusing these practices into their everyday work? We have invited all of our leaders to engage in their own professional development. So those are episodic. I am leading some of those with our cabinet. I'm leading some of those with our deans, with our chairs, and so forth. What we are asking individual leaders to do is to continue their own self-work, their own self-reflection, and as Dr. Obear said, to examine our policies, our practices, the way they conduct their business, the way they do assignments, their internal promotional opportunities, internal succession planning, and so forth. Really examine their own leadership practices and the ways that they show up. We're also asking them to invite feedback from the people they serve and support. Right? We all know that we have a view of ourselves and we think, I got this, I'm woke, I'm aware, I'm evolved, but we want people to always be asking for feedback. And we've also been encouraging leaders to think about the distinction between equal and equity, and really examine practices through that lens as well. And finally, I'm asking leaders to put this topic on their agendas. So whether you are a faculty leader, a staff leader, a student leader, I'm asking everyone to put it on your next organizational meeting agenda so that you get in the habit of talking about these things, so that you get in the habit of responding to issues as they emerge, and you create space for people to notice, to name, to engage on a regular basis. Dr. Obear?
So agree. And as we just continue down to your meetings, as I mentioned, those questions for planning and issues, every agenda have some of the other packet of having 2 other people, process observers, watching group dynamics, because you could have 3 white people say, oh, that policy actually is great from a race lens. Whereas the folks who have been going through some white ally development, who have more maybe knowledge and competency, say, wait, I disagree. And then another white person cuts them off. And the folks of color just shake their head and they're like, this is how we keep. So group, make sure the group is high performing, uses a race lens. I want individually, I think leaders can, change agents can share these competencies, say, this is what I'm working on. Share it with their peers, share it with people that are on teams with them, share it with their super, and say, I know it's not embedded yet but this is what I'm working on. I'd like you, our next one-on-one, to tell me where you see me. So again, influence up and out by saying, this is what I'm committed to. I'd love your feedback. And I'm not sending you to folk of color to teach us. I'm sending you to other white colleagues, because again, as we expand our sphere of influence, eventually you can ask your leaders, could we have more clear conversations on how close these are to what we want? And to get leaders really infusing it into, this is who we are. And we get it into our performance conversations, even if it's not quite systemic yet. Having leaders get very clear what the what is and say, the vision, the what, and then I will hold you all accountable for the how. And just like you're doing systemically, VC Pettit, how do we do a similar as leaders? Everyone in our area, twice a year. What are your plans? What are the results? What's your data? And you just keep coming, and it's large group, and we just keep scaffolding it down. The final thought I have would be what ifs. That so many white folk are scared to say anything, and they're like, I don't want to make a mistake, because we're stuck in that white supremacy culture of perfectionism. Don't want to get it wrong. There's an either or right, wrong. And so to create a learning community where we are continually learning and growing, this, and we will do what if. So what if this racist dynamic happens? What if this silence of violence happens? What could we do? Practice that every other meeting, white accountability groups where it's ongoing. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Obear and VC Pettit. All right, so the other question that we had from our office is about resistance. What if colleagues and leaders resist efforts to embed these types of practices in daily activities? So we love the competencies, we love the questions, we love all the tools and strategies that you're sharing with us. What if they resist the efforts and kind of say, I don't know about this. This is a little bit too much. How do we deal with that?
Resistance? Who has resistance? No, that absolutely happens, and in fact is expected, because what we are doing in this work is transformative. It is shifting systems and structures. It is, as Daryl Smith would say, interrupting and disrupting the usual. So people are uncomfortable, and it will cause some resistance. My approach is to move in a little bit closer, to try to understand the source of the resistance, understand the root of resistance, and then invite people in. I try not to use force. That doesn't work. You can ask any trainer or diversity educator. The worst thing that you can do is make a training mandatory for people to sit in front of you, because people can be present and refuse to learn. So really trying to understand the source, the root of the resistance, and inviting them in. The other approach is to create structures around them to compel them to act. So if we, in fact, have expectations in one's performance evaluation, that might nudge people a little bit. So we're not, I ultimately would love to change hearts and minds. That's the goal, right? For people to understand that we are all connected, and my liberation is also your liberation. And until we get to that point with individuals, we can create systems, structures, processes, expectations to compel people to behave differently. They can still not believe something, but what you will do at UC San Diego is treat people with respect. What you will do is know that we will respond when someone says you are treating them inappropriately or with bias or with discrimination. So, Dr. Bear, over to you.
People might need to breathe on that one, Dr. Pettit. I believe, as you do, as you move in, so have this conversation with leaders as they're getting clear about the vision and the expectations. Say, so what resistance do you anticipate? What are you already hearing? What resistance comes up as you, even though you know this is the way we need to go, because you see, Steve said we're doing this, and have them practice. So when a colleague or someone in your direct asks that, what could you say? So, and leaders, what do we expect of each other when there is resistance, where someone just decides they're not going to show up at a meeting where you're talking about anti-racism, or stay silent? Because that's how it can show up, is this, I'm just going to wait you all out. It's not always a direct racist comment, a racist thought. And another thought is when someone does say something that is more coded racist, does something that has not many people might pick up, but you know there's a racist impact grounded in white supremacy, culture, and beliefs, to say, you know, I've loved it when we've talked about our vision. Help me understand how what you just said or did is aligned to our vision to be an anti-racist organization. And you can gently ask them. I know as a white person, I have done and said so many racist things over my career, still could. And sometimes I had no idea what I was doing. So I at least like to enter with, engage at an interpersonal level, help me realize and see. And have leaders have the space to really practice what will I do when? And then scaffold that down, because if senior leaders are asking that questions, every leadership group down to quote direct supervisors, and to be honest, direct supervisors may hear more of this resistance or have more of that resistance. This depends who they are and how much training and opportunity they've had. But the privilege of training development often is a top down. So often folks who are new to supervision may not have had the opportunity, as many of us had, the privilege to have the space to learn and grow and be a part of change.
So Kathy, we're wondering if you could extend some of the conceptual work that you have shared with us today to provide concrete examples of what allyship might look like in a meeting. And you mentioned decision-making, hiring, recruiting, coaching, developing. I think the community would benefit from 2 examples at least of a scenario or times where we can be more proactive and concrete.
So someone that's not on a hiring committee can say, looks like we're going to be hiring in the next couple months. Can we sit down as a group to look at how are we intentionally creating a racially inclusive, culturally competent process, interview questions, and how can folks who are white allies, change agents, be a part of this as we're moving forward? And can we look at how our practices might not? And so use your positional, relational influence to call the question, because often folks are moving this quickly, particularly in this time of second year of pandemic. Anytime you're in a group with decision-making, you can have in front of you the list of what group dynamics to be watching for and the list of the 5 questions. And so you could be the one to say, you know, this may be new to this group, and I love that idea. What I need help with is by group membership with a race lens, who's going to get benefits and who's might not. And we thinking about generation to the US and English language learners, and we thinking about, and you just model by owning, I'd like this group to talk about this because I'm not sure I see all the ways this idea may not truly live into what we say we are about. I could do more. Did I get more specific for you?
Sure, one more. Yeah, that's great. So that's a good hiring one, how you might use your moment and your sphere of influence. Is there another training, development?
Um, you could look at, say, can we spend some time looking at all the different professional opportunities that we last year and this year and plan to offer? And let's use a race lens to see where are we learning these competencies. Even if the organization hasn't said yes to the ones I put out, just say, this is something somebody shared. And where could people be learning this? And how do we teach people how to analyze policies and practices? If folks could learn planning, decision-making, policy practices, and process mapping with a race lens, that will take any department a long way. So you could, in a division department, say, who wants to learn these skills? And let's come together. So there's at least one or two in every team department that has greater capacity that can work with leaders. Because sometimes managers, supervisors are so overwhelmed, they may not remember. So one or two folks embedded that is ongoing, and you've got a group of champions and advocates, that might be a place to intentionally do some of that training and development, or to map out every division. Do we have those folks in literally every meeting? And if not, who else can we develop?
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So I'll turn it to VC Pettit now, because I think people might be wondering what's happening on campus. How can we get involved on campus? And then Kathy, we're going to take the questions from the audience that have come in. So we're going to ask VC Pettit to speak to, and we welcome your comments on this, Dr. Obear. How can we get more white people actively engaged in creating anti-racist organizations? And we understand that there is a white allyship initiative on campus, and there was a 21-day challenge. And so just to let people know how they might get involved and what it means for UC San Diego.
All right. So we sent a campus announcement about the White Allyship and Accountability Initiative. You can find that on our website, again, diversity.ucsd.edu. It is self-paced and it is just a start. We are encouraging our campus community members to consider that, get engaged with the curriculum, and invite other colleagues in. Again, as I said, we have the 21-day anti-racism challenge. What I continue to hear from people was the question, okay, when's the next challenge? Let's do another one. And what I said to people is start over. It was a really intense experience, lots of really good material there. And we invite people to take that again. Consider the 21-day anti-racism challenge with your own group, your own organization. And that said, we are going to have another 21-day anti-racism challenge, perhaps next quarter. We're still putting some pieces together for that. So yeah, those are the two primary experiences I'd like to share. And the other thing, Diane, will you talk a little bit about how we are expecting the White Allyship and Accountability Initiative to grow? The leaders we have invited to support that effort, what we are asking of them. And I see some of them are here on the call today.
Absolutely.
And thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you, those of you out there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, those who've been in that group. So yes, I'm happy to speak briefly about what we have been doing. The link will be put in the chat for those who would like to learn more about the initiative. What we have done is consider those who have formal training, and whether through their research or through the Lead Fellows program, which is led out of our office by Drs. Edwina Welch and John Travers. And we have a cohort each year of about 20 to 25, and I think we were at about 4 cohorts. Well, in the last year, the leaders of the initiative through our office instituted Lead 2.0, which had an anti-racist function. So persons who've received that training, done formal reading and some individual self-work as well as institutional work have joined us. And some of our faculty colleagues whose research is in that area have also joined us, a small cadre of about 15 to 20 that Kathy has been pleased to meet, who are interested in advancing that work, both in health sciences and on our quote main campus, have joined us to have discussions about what this initiative might look like. So they've helped us develop the content as well as shared experiences. A few will be helping us with training. So we have HR representation on this as well. And so they may be either architects of the work to continue in other divisions and departments, or they may train others, or will be available for consultation if you would like in your unit to lead a particular area. Of course, we're a campus of 55,000 plus, and so we have to think about a cohort based and a cascading type model. So as VC Pettit mentioned, the resources which we will put in the chat hopefully soon are there, and similar to the 21-day challenge, there are modules that you might follow. So there's the book, Me and White Supremacy, and that's one resource. There's another one module that looks at our campus resources, best practices in EDI and how to be anti-racist. And there's a toolkit. And so if you want to start with the toolkit, if you want to start with the history of racism in the US or throughout the globe, throughout the world, there's also that as an option. Again, it's self-paced, self-directed. Groups are available for consultation. Our office is available for consultation as well. So there,
Diane, if I may, I forgot to add a couple of things. We have also recently had several campus-wide summits and conversations. There was one on becoming a Hispanic serving institution with the emphasis on servingness. That recording is available. I think it's available, or it will be shortly. If someone will assist me in dropping that in the chat. If it's not available, check my website. You will hear from some of our students about some of the things they need for UC San Diego to become a more anti-racist organization. You'll hear from some of our faculty about how they are already engaging in this work. You'll hear from some of our staff members who have been doing this work for a long time. We also just completed an initiative that was co-led by Dr. Evan A. Williams and Glenda Davis on enhancing the Black student experience. Some of those sessions were also recorded. Really incredible session. And I want to draw your attention to our upcoming efforts to celebrate Asian and Pacific Islander heritage. So there are structured activities that we have that you can visit our website to learn more about. We also are having these symposia and acknowledgements, cultural acknowledgements, to further our own learning. So I want to encourage you to take advantage of those, check our websites for the information. And yesterday, I lose track of time. Was it yesterday or a day before we had Estella Ben-Simon? Day before?
On Wednesday.
Wednesday.
This week.
The pandemic time is just,
I know.
So we recorded that. That will also be available, again, helping to advance our equity work and looking at the ways we support our minoritized students primarily through our work. And finally, our strategic plan for inclusive excellence. We are approaching the next round of accountability meetings where we are asking units to examine their data, not just the numbers, right, but also the climate, also your policies and so forth, and to tell us what you are doing to help us improve. So all of those things are really encouraging full engagement and also full campus-wide accountability.
And I love all those structures. A couple extra others that came to me as you were talking. All those resources that you all have and available. Could you imagine if just one or two white folk in every unit said, we're going to watch this one, and then invite people to do it and then come together. So you could have informal white accountability groups, and then just come and talk insights. How close are we to really implementing all that? Estella Ben-Simon talked to, and so you could do it that informally, casually. However, the sum of us, Heather McGee, I don't know if you've seen her workout lately, podcasts as well. What I know from myself as a white person, I hear many whites, we get excited, energized, and then we distract ourselves with other things. She talks a lot about the cost of racism, the cost of white supremacy to whites. And until we whites know the personal and collective costs to us, family members, historically, our children, young people going in the future. And so I have just a little bit about costs in the packet, as well as that book could be a wonderful. But my handout around unwritten rules, any white person playing with that will go, wait, in all my identities, this dominant white academic culture, the unproductive parts of it, I can't show up thriving. I'm scared to speak my truth to power. I'm not always valued and respected. And so I want to help change this culture for everyone, because if I'm feeling that, then my goodness, Indigenous folks, folks of color, 10, 12, 20 times negative impact. The other thing is we're finishing up a Zoom open white accountability group, Dr. Rachel Forrest and I, it's our second one. Might have been Monday, but Dr. VC Pettit, I've lost track. I thought I need to know more history. And I was a history major and I've been reading a lot. So May 12th, we're going to start another open Zoom, again, anybody, up to 500, about history. And we're going to start with how some of the basic concepts that we talked about foundational in the first webinar. So if anyone's interested, you can email me and I can get you that information. But we have to make this personal. We white people have to put a face on it. What is in our interest? Why do we care? So that we stay in it for the long haul. And some people might say you should just be doing it. Yes, and that doesn't work. So why are you personally committed, your passion within all the structures of accountability? That's a few other ways that might get more white people in just hold several white accountability groups in your division, get more folks involved.
Thank you, Kathy. We have questions now that have come in since we have been having our conversation. And the first is, as a white professor who teaches about Asia, how do I learn to recognize the things in my syllabus and course design that are excluding or otherwise harming Black students? If I ask Black colleagues for help, I'm adding to their work burden. Kathy?
So my first thought was, who are all the other white faculty who are teaching content about nationality, race, racism, globalism, colonialism, who have decolonized their curriculum? How's that for another term? Or at least have racial consciousness farther than you have. And see if maybe there's a learning community, again, not 10 weeks, but would 2 sessions, would faculty come and say, here's what I did, and would they be willing to look at what you have planned, your readings, videos, course, right? Is anti-Blackness included in your curriculum and your readings intentionally? Historically, how anti-Blackness has been exported through colonization. I may have some of this wrong, but I'm thinking about Britain. Goa was Portuguese, I think, in India. So have anti-Blackness intentionally a part of the conversation then and now. And I'm thinking national. What are the different national faculty organizations you're a part of to have it be a call to see who wants to come and do this work nationally, so we're impacting not just UCSD or your individual. And the final thought I had is extra credit, and this one may not be a good idea. But what if you invite any student that's ever been in your course or signed up for the course for 10 points, up to 10 points, to look at all this material, analyze it with a race lens, but particularly an anti-Blackness lens. So you're not requiring, but there's extra credit. Those are my top ideas that float up.
Thank you for that, Kathy. And might I add, I want to be respectful of the sensitivity and the intention around not burdening Black or other minoritized community members to do the work for you. And I think it's okay for you to do your work first and then say, I'd like your thoughts and reflections on this, right? Don't go to minoritized people to say, I really want to do this thing, and then you're expecting them to help you build it from ground up. Do your work first.
Thank you.
And then how to barter. It's like, I'd love some support on this. And if there's ever anything I can do, come to your class, edit so that it truly is a bartering of.
A collaborative effort with mutual benefit. That's awesome. Thank you, Kathy. All right. So the next question is from health sciences, although it applies to all of us, I believe. In health sciences, we are looking into which trainings and professional development opportunities are already available to help folks meet anti-racist competencies, and where we need to develop more opportunities for learning. Any thoughts about what are basic competencies that all employees must have in an anti-racist organization, and whether there are some that would be specific to leaders/supervisors as opposed to team members? So competencies for all employees. Are there competencies that you think leaders, supervisors need to have that are distinct from what team members need to have? Great question. Thank you.
You want to go first? You want me to? Oh.
Oh, I think you refer to your 11 competencies. I think that's a way to go. Is that by hierarchy or is it by any person who is employed? What do you think?
That's what my face is about. I'm like, I don't see any distinction, except I'd add some to leaders that you will lead transformational change. You will be held accountable for the results. So I might have leaders more of that. I could be wrong, but I think every single employee has a role in recognizing racist dynamics, policies, practices, speaking up, interrupting, interpersonal, as well as. So I could be wrong. I'm an external consultant, but that's where I sit.
What I'd like to add is that I think we have a slightly higher set of expectations for our leaders. We want to ensure that we are hiring individuals who will do no harm, and individuals who are more self-reflective because of the privileged and powerful positions that they hold. So part of our effort to ensure that we are hiring individuals with some basic knowledge of the kind of educational, scholarly environment we want to create is we have the contribution to diversity statement that is required for every faculty or administrative applicant. We are moving to also add that to our staff application process. So we're saying to prospective leaders, here's what we value at UC San Diego. Articulate in your contribution to diversity statement what you provide evidence that you understand equity, diversity, and inclusion. Share with us how you will enter this environment and continue to pursue and maintain a healthy climate. And then we hold the leaders accountable for that, right? So it is part of our job application. We are trying to make sure that at least every hiring committee asks at minimum one diversity related question, right? And you're assessing the candidate based on that. And then all of the performance evaluations of all of our leaders, I'm filing through my mind to make sure I'm telling the truth here. All of the performance evaluations ask about what the leader is doing to uphold our principles of community. So all of that to say there are competencies and expectations of everyone, and I expect a little bit more from our leaders.
Can I add a little bit more?
Please.
Because as you were sharing, I got I totally agree. And then I'm going, oh, I've always been middle class or professional class. And so when I think about folks that are low income, paid fair living wage at UCSD, I'm seeing enough nods, that it's actually not as safe for folks with very little positional power to raise issues or given the time, notice the language, given to be a part of task forces and working groups. So clearly all folk held accountable for interpersonal dynamics, culture, and climate, and to speak up when you see something and to share, because often folks who are really grassroots, I don't know if that's the right language, front line, hear and see things much more than managers and senior leaders. And so how can there be a feedback loop? But again, there's got to be employment safety. And then we would love your participation, and we will make that happen schedule wise. Those are all ways we can navigate hierarchy and classism, as I believe the folks closest to the work and implementation and serving students know the most generally. So how do we have their voice and participation in the culture change work?
Thank you. All right, so the next one is a faculty related one, and then we have a general one about white privilege and giving up power. So just to cue you for that one. So this one, as a tenured faculty member, I feel, quote, safe in raising my voice and taking action in my department. But my junior untenured colleagues have both social and systemic conditions that cause them to fear being engaged. Specifically, it may put their tenure at risk, either out of reduction of, quote, standard metrics of research productivity, unquote, or retribution from senior colleagues that vote on their tenure. Kathy, any suggestions on how we as an institution change these conditions so that everyone who wants to do anti-racism work can do so without fear of the consequences to their careers?
Wouldn't you love to be able
one.
to control them? I'm sorry.
I know. No, so that's a tough one.
And y'all know more about this than I do. Do you want to start? I hear it directed to me, so I'll follow your leadership. I always have an opinion. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Systemically, you probably already have found, but I would again use national and international organizations who's already changing the tenure and promotion practices so that the 11 competencies that are baked into that, as well as all of the student support, student success, student access work that folk of color, indigenous folks are doing on top of the job that most white folks aren't doing all of that work. So how is that built into, and some people putting in service, could you imagine if it's a whole nother category? And then analyzing how research that criteria is so infused. I might piss some people off, white supremacy culture there. So just really looking at the criteria for promotion and tenure, shifting that. The mentoring and development practices and networks for folks who are not yet tenured, not only individual folk, but having the chance to come together. Maybe it's BIPOC and white spaces, so that there's places to speak truth to power that's not in an environment that would have retribution threat. And then working with all the senior faculty, perpetuating a white supremacist culture, climate, racist attitudes. Sexism comes in with this, because tell me I'm wrong, it's often women of color who have even more barriers in promotion and tenure, much less student evaluations. And then just the emotional support throughout that process. And just like we're trying to reimagine policing and campus safety, could we reimagine, reform student success processes so all are responsible and held accountable, and it doesn't by default go to all the folk of color to do all that work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so then the next question is, given that white privilege can often take a form that is not overtly visible, how do you deal with the pushback from white friends or family that what they achieved was through hard work and efforts of their own making? It seems that their stance or view is that by bringing up the white privilege structure, somehow it's a personal attack on their achievements, thus shaping the dynamic of the discussion in a negative way. So I've worked for this. This is mine. I don't know what you're talking about.
I pulled myself from my bootstraps. Why can't everybody else? And then the whole splitting of folk of color. Look, the Asians that did it, right? So we could come back to that. So it's the same dynamic. You want to go, VC Pettit? You want me to go?
I think they want to hear from you. They hear from me all the time. What I will say first is that when we are having these conversations, it's important that we not individuate and talk about, have the person sitting in front of us thinking it's about them. We are talking about systems and structural inequality.
Building on that, individually, kind of like you said before, as a white person, I might, so tell me more about your background, your family experience, and how you worked hard. So I would engage the resistance by building a bit of relationships, relating in. And then I would tell a bunch of stories about my personal and family history as much as I know. And the most recent is my dad was a white vet. And so GI Bill, masters, as well as low, if no loan for our home in a middle to professional class right outside suburb DC, so that my schooling was very different, much more privileged. I could keep going. And so share family history and say, you know, I relate. I didn't used to think I had any white privilege. I'm a lesbian. How can I have white privilege? And then it's taken me a long time to recognize, oh, when I'm in meetings, when I speak, I get seen very differently. And in my doctoral work, I took 12 years to finish. If I'd been a person of color, would I have been given the same type of support, 2 times stopping out, hanging in there with me? I don't know. When I hear other stories. So to separate, we worked hard. I worked hard on my doctorate, but as a white person, my life has been set up from the beginning. Both sides of my family, 3 generations, doctors or PhDs, lawyers, white privilege intersecting with education privilege, class privilege, all that set up so that I can literally be here in front of you today. So white allies, change agents, do some genealogy work around access privilege so that you have stories to say, I hear you, it's hard, and I've always had access and class privilege. And so having folks who grew up poor, working class, and white to have space to talk about how do you hold both of that? How do you have also white privilege and the pain of classism? That's one last thing I'll say is when we are in pain from one of our marginalized identities as white folks, it's hard to look at white privilege. And so how to have space for healing in our marginalized identities and systems change in our marginalized identities might help more white folks also see how white privilege is built into hiring. I could just keep going. Performance management, mentoring, it's all built in.
Thank you, Kathy, for helping us with that intersectional analysis. It really complicates our conversation because I don't want to say it's more than race, but it is race with all the other elements the social dimensions that you've just mentioned. So we appreciate that analysis. The next question is about allyship, the pace of campus life and our culture here at UC San Diego. Do you have advice for helping allies / staff / employees who work in a very fast-paced, always urgent campus environment to slow down and really think intentionally about the anti-racism work they do? UC San Diego has a, quote, always on culture, unquote. Students, faculty, and staff. We're getting some head nods, and I'm doing one too. There's always something coming up that needs attention. How can we get people to slow down and focus more on this work? Culture of urgency is bigger than any one department. Over to you, Kathy.
First, my heart is opening. Just y'all breathe. What's the personal cost? Illness, heart, diabetes. I could keep personal costs of these last 14 months, 5 years. I could keep going. The always on is so white supremacy culture. I have to name that. And I participate and help create that. So one quick thought is every Friday at 10:30 Eastern, I have committed to doing community connections. It's a space in my week. 10, 15, 20 people show up, all folks in anti-racist work, education, to be. Sometimes we strategize, but it's really to come and be. And for me, it's a weekly touch point that I'm committed to where I learn and grow. And then every time someone shares, I go, oh, I need to do this or that. So it's a self-reflection as well, but it's not a doing space. So a being. You could also, every white ally, for this 45 minutes, I'm going to be having a working lunch every Friday. I'm going to be eating while I want people to come if you can. And what are a dilemma? And so you build it into your schedule, and maybe every week feels a lot, but to me, having a weekly hour plus intentionally says, I will participate at UCSC the best of my ability, but to do that, I need ongoing connectivity, support, a learning community, confidential space where we can gather. Could you imagine if departments looked at this always on, fast paced sense of urgency and wondered what's the differential impact on our Indigenous and folk of color? And just breathe into that. There may not be room for that, but
we're going to be out of breath by the time Becky and I stop listening on the whole campus. We have close to 300 people still on. Thank you for staying with us, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Obear. We're continuing. And yeah, breathing is important. I was in a meeting yesterday, and one of the persons on the call, who is a nurse, talked about laughter being good medicine, and how there's all this research that when we laugh, it increases our serotonin levels. Our health sciences people are going to correct me, I'm sure, but they show oncology patients or people who need critical care funny movies, and they talk about things that are lighthearted so that it can literally lift their spirits. So for us, it's the breathing. I appreciate that we can't turn on the funny movies during work, but we can certainly laugh and we can breathe. Thank you for that. Okay, so the next question is about departmental dynamics and how to integrate EDI work in that department. I currently have a department where leaders are all white. Is it problematic for them to teach, create action plans, and fix things as it relates to diversity and inclusion for our department? Over to you, Kathy.
so just to quote VC Pettit a moment ago, do your work and then partner. So two thoughts. One is, I think all decision-making, planning needs to be collaborative with the entire department. I believe all people who have to implement anything need to have some opportunity to give voice, to look at the data, give ideas. I'm not saying everyone's in the room and the final decision maker. And so first, I would look at how is your decision-making planning process replicating top-down power hoarding, and how can you make it more inclusive, collaborative? And white leaders, how can you start your own white accountability space? Clear curriculum, skill, the 11 competencies, and there's probably resources in your area. Racial Equity Institute, I'm going to sign up for one of their 2 days. They were highlighted in the Seeing White podcast, which was phenomenal. It's from several years ago, especially numbers 2 and 3, which I learned so much about history. So do the 21-day challenge together, and then what are you learning that applies to how you do decision making? So yes, and anything you come up with, run it by lots of colleagues who have more racial consciousness. Because again, it's not only demographics, it's racial consciousness and skill. And so can you as a leadership team have a not master, that's the term they use, but a confidential group of folk that you come and you share, this is what we're doing, what are we not seeing? And you do the same back and forth, UCSD and or UC, national confidential space to say, what am I missing? And all those folks that are already allies and change agents and can be consultants that you both have named, how might you partner with to help until you are competent-ish to not make so many mistakes along the way?
Diane, I'd like to ask Kathy a question since we have her here. Early in your presentation, you said that many institutions are now moving away from the commitments they made right after the killing of George Floyd, and there's a flurry of statements and commitments. I don't want to be that institution. So I want to make sure we keep this work as a high priority. I'd like to know what you've seen in your work across the country about ways that we can ensure that we're keeping this high in our list of many priorities, and ensuring that this is a thread that runs through everything we do. So my office, as a structure, people often expect that we are going to, always be at the center of things. So just love to hear some of your thoughts about how we make sure we are not one of those campuses that says, oh, we're just going to respond and be present when there's a crisis.
Well, if I was one of your AVCs or VCs, no one, I'm going to be held accountable publicly in about a month or two. I'd be having conversations all the way through. What are y'all doing? Tell us more. What are you planning? So that it will go into that. But more from this point forward, every month, I'd have the AVC. I want you meeting with all the managers and asking the same questions. What's the current state around race dynamics, policies, practices, programs in your area? What are you doing? What else you need to be doing? How will you make sure we're not letting Asian American, Indigenous folks drop off? Because that's often what can happen in this work, or in your organization, serving our Black students, because the number. So just breathe. And so I would have it a monthly update and written update, maybe every 6 weeks. So it's just how we do business, just like you do budget updates. Y'all don't wait every year to do budget and write or updates. Managers, don't they have to look like every month? Don't they get something? And so similarly, have that level of accountability. But until leaders have in the line of supervision and they're the ones asking for it, and you've set up a system that every vice chancellor, it's in their best interest to have this monthly analysis, send us information so that we're ongoing, so that end of the year, it's not, that's my best thought at the moment.
Thank you.
And then saying, I will not be that campus. Every leader say, we will not be that campus. Recommit as white senior leaders and other leaders of color who are saying, this is what we're committed to. I am. And in our area, we are moving towards and will be an anti-racist organization.
Thank you, Kathy. So we got the 5-minute warning not long ago. So we'll ask one more question. And I think you've addressed some of these. Feel free to add some other things, but I think this is a great way for us to close. A big one, but very important one. How can senior leaders develop people in their divisions to dismantle racism, develop white allies, and change agents? Some was addressed in your talk, but certainly some nuggets that with which you'd like to leave us. We'd love that.
I would take my self-assessment for white allies and change agents, which is more detailed, put it into some kind of a jot form, send it out the entire organization. Either what do you need to learn? What do leaders need to learn? Gather that data and say, I as a senior leader, so I would do one just for you, kind of use it as a 360. Then plan a curriculum based on that. And as a leader say, this is what I'm doing in the next month. I'm working on these. In our division, here are the programs to move us. Next month, we're going to be focused on this. Not that we're done looking at how to interrupt racist dynamics and microaggressions, but next month, we're now going to look at planning and decision-making. And so lead from where you are based on very clear skills that you personally, and then I'd hold a monthly or every 2 weeks what I'm learning. And so maybe it's an open town hall of want to know anything, but here's what I'm learning as a white leader. And here's what I expect you to be learning. All of us with these capacities, because to be honest, not all folk of color have these same capacities either. And saying that, I feel a little nervous, but the truth is I expect all folks in this organization, some of us, me, white person, and many white people, haven't chosen to develop these capacities. And many folk of color have had to in order to basically survive in a predominantly white dominant cultural environment. So, but all of us need to move in this direction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kathy Obear. And I do appreciate your reminder to breathe, because even though we do this work professionally, and a number of us have been in this line of work, I feel my chest tightening a little bit. I'm wondering what people are thinking. We are wondering what now. We know what we will be doing in our office, but certainly as we lead the effort, we are hoping for more collaborators and thinking this is not easy work, and it does require a multifaceted, multidimensional approach. So we thank you for your guidance to us to do our work, to be concrete, to be committed. And so we thank everyone today for joining us with the magnificent. I feel like I need to find something that goes with a K or with a C, like charismatic or, competent or something. Kathy Obear, we thank you so much. And we thank all of our audience members for joining us, our tech team and our EDI team, of course, VC Pettit for her leadership and sponsoring this amazing time and webinar. And so we just have a few announcements for folks as we approach the end of the webinar. We would like to share some ways that you can continue to be involved to help to build that momentum for the movement for racial justice by visiting our anti-racism resources page. And we have other resources where you can receive guidance. Some links are being dropped in the chat that you can take a look at and think about how we might promote awareness and knowledge about equity, diversity, and inclusion, specifically work centered on the Black experience in academia at UC San Diego. These resources can be found using the QR code on the screen and in the chat. Additionally, you can find self-directed education modules for the Chancellor's 21-Day Anti-Racism Challenge that was just referenced, and the White Allyship Action and Accountability Initiative. These modules can be found again using the QR code on screen and in the chat. Immediately after this webinar, you will be directed to a survey. We appreciate your taking a few minutes to provide your feedback so we can think about what we might improve and strengthen in coming offerings. And a recording of this webinar, I know some people asked about this, will be posted on our website in the next few business days, hopefully by next week at diversity.ucsd.edu. And we look forward to hearing from you. Please be in touch if you have feedback, questions, you want to get moving forward with some of these initiatives. Diversity@ucsd.edu. Thank you again to Dr. Kathy Obear. Many thanks to VC Pettit, to the EDI team and our support. To everyone, have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend. Thank you so much.